Well, that was awesome. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And now I'd like you to help me welcome our very dear friend, Imam Sykes, to the podium.
I think I'll need the clicker. We're advancing the slides, right?
Oh, yes.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. May the peace and blessings of God be with you all. May the peace and blessings be upon this entire humanity. The community gathered here today in the spirit of love, truth, and shared seeking. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a small framing note. When I first came here, I was told we love people to dress in their Islamic or their spiritual sort of clothing. But quickly I began to realize that maybe I was being identified only as an imam and not a member of the community. That pained me, because I also want you to recognize that I serve as a licensed clinical social worker, a teacher, and a community activist. I'm not only an imam. So I'm going to ask that on the next program, I'm not registered as Imam Sykes, but just as Abdul, a member of the community. My life's work has centered on healing, education, and connections, whether through faith, psychology, or public service. So when I speak about Islam today, it is not to convert anyone or to compel belief. Islam teaches in the second chapter of the Holy Quran in the 256th verse, La ikraha fi ad-din. Yeah, I know everybody knows what that means, right? Good. Now you would have got the bonus points had you known that, but it means there is no compulsion in religion, and this comes from the Quran. So I want to make it very clear that I'm not here to compel you to anything. It also says in chapter 109, verse 6, Alaykum dinukum waliya din. To you be your way, and to me be mine. So my purpose is not to convert anyone into Islam, but to invite us all into understanding, so that we identify with each other and relate to each other and no longer have fear about what we don't know about each other. It's so that we can see how Islam has long been woven into the fabric of America. In that spirit, I share today also resonates deeply with principles of Unitarian Universalism. The affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, whether they're Muslim, Christian, Jew, atheist, agnostic, whatever they are. It is from that shared group of love and learning that I speak to you today. Another reason why I wore a suit, to identify as American. These are not foreign threads. They are American threads, not like the jeans that we call threads. Threads that shimmer quietly beneath our nation's story. Today we will trace those hidden threads together, from enslaved Africans whispering Quranic prayers in the night, to the echoes of Islamic rhythm carried into gospel and blues, to the modern voices of conscience who carried light into the world. When we speak of the early American story, we often picture pilgrims or pioneers dressed in overalls, perhaps, but rarely do we picture Muslims. Even in the history books, you do not see Muslims. Yet historians estimate that 15 to 30% of enslaved Africans brought to America were Muslims. They carried not only labor and skills, but memory, language, and faith. They recited verses of the Quran beneath their breath, their bodies in chain, but their hearts in prayer. That is where the first quiet influence of Islam in America began. With people who never stopped turning their hearts toward the Creator, even when the world turned its back on them. Let me introduce you to Omar ibn Said, a scholar from West Africa who was enslaved and brought to North Carolina. And probably you can't tell, but that's where I'm from. In 1831, he wrote his autobiography in Arabic, one of the first in American history written in that language. He filled its pages not with the bitterness because he was enslaved, but with Quranic verses of patience and faith. As he stood in the field being beaten by a white man, he sang the praises of God. Even in captivity, he affirmed knowledge, dignity, and divine hope. And then there was Ayuba Suleiman Delo, another. He was known in the West as Job bin Suleiman. Captured in 1730, sold into slavery, he astonished his captors by writing Arabic letters home that found their way to England. Freed, he returned to America. Yet his legacy lived on in the phrase that historians wrote about him. He never abandoned prayer, even in chains. And when we look at history of war in early Islam, when Muslims were being persecuted, we never abandoned prayer. A group of people guard and a group of people pray. And then we have Bilali Muhammad from the Sapaloo Island, Georgia. A devout Muslim who managed a plantation and wrote the Bilali document in Arabic, a manual of Islamic law and ethics that still survives today, focusing on the Hanafi school of fiqh, or jurisprudence, Islamic law. His writings echo the same principles that shaped early America: discipline, stewardship, and the belief that ethical principles should guide human law. The sound of Islam also traveled through rhythm and voice. Scholars have traced the melodic patterns of the Quran or the Quranic recitation into the call and response structure of the African American spirituals. And one of the things I love about this congregation is that when they have a speaker, they invite the speaker to suggest music or poems or responsive readings. And we could not have had a better song than Wade in the Water to demonstrate what I'm talking to you about today. Listen closely to the moaning tones of early blues singers, and you can still hear the muhlizmu, it's called in music. those rising and falling notes that echo the adhan. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Now can you imagine the slaves singing that in the bellows of a ship? Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home, with a band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. It touches the soul, doesn't it? It just grabs your heart and wakes you up spiritually. Across oceans and centuries, faith found its rhythm and its voice, its freedom's hearts. Ethnomusicologist Gerhard Kubik, in his book African and the Blues from the University of Vienna, documented these shared tonal patterns and vocal inflections. Historian Sylviane Diouf, a visiting scholar at Brown University and author of Servants of Allah, African Muslims Enslaved in the Americas, likewise noticed and noted a striking resemblance between the Islamic call to prayer and the 19th century field holler, highlighting how enslaved West African Muslims carried their sacred sound across the Atlantic. So you could say we brought music to America. So the next time you're humming a tune or swaying the gospel, you might be tapping your foot to something that began on another shore. That sound, that blending of note between heaven and earth, it carried something more than a melody. It carried the history of those people, the heart of those people. Perhaps it was the way they could find a voice, by singing. It carried memories of the homeland where they were allowed to speak their language and worship their religion. When enslaved West African Muslims were torn from their homelands, many carried the Quran not on paper, but in their hearts. They could not keep their names, their homes, or their freedom, but they kept their rhythm of prayer. The fields of Georgia, South Carolina, and Louisiana, those rhythms became a new kind of prayer. A call and response between human suffering and divine hope. The moans became melody. The holisma became memory. And the sacred sound of Allahu Akbar, Allah is great, found its echoes centuries later in our Lord, I'm troubled by the water. You see, faith finds a way to sing, doesn't it? When you start thinking about your faith, you start sort of singing and dancing around in your house, right? Yeah. Faith finds a way to sing even when the world tries to silence you and make you invisible and walk away when they see you coming. Across traditions, whether the adhan, a spiritual or a psalm, the human soul keeps reaching for the same horizon. The sound of belonging, the sound of the Creator. And maybe that's what we share most deeply. Not our doctrines, but our desire to be heard by the divine. By the 19th century, new waves of Muslims arrived, Syrian and Lebanese, families who settled, no, not in New York, no, not in Los Angeles, California, but who settled in North Dakota, Iowa, and the Midwest. They built the first masajid, not in big cities, but in cornfields and prairies. The mother mosque, or masjid we'd like to say, in America is in Cedar Rapids. Surprise! Completed in 1934. It's widely recognized as the first building in the United States that was designed and constructed specifically to be a masjid. Earlier masajid, plural for mosque, existed in the 1920s in converted buildings. Their lives testified that faith can bloom anywhere. Islam was never only an immigrant faith. It was interwoven with America from the beginning. The 20th century brought voices who eliminated those threads in new ways. Malcolm X, who proclaimed the unity of humanity. Muhammad Ali, who I knew personally, and I didn't mean to make that rhyme, who modeled faith and courage. And then a man who doesn't get enough credit because of his color, I believe, Imam Sykes, who led the largest mass return movement and embrace of mainstream Islam in America today. I will not go deep into the history, but if you know anything about black nationalism, the Nation of Islam believed that Fard Muhammad was God incarnate. Doesn't sound like the Islam that I've taught you about, does it? In fact, on the last page of the Final Call, which is their newspaper, it says that the intention of the group is to separate, to build a nation for the black man to rule. That's juxtaposed to what Islam teaches. But he led that whole group, a massive movement, into what I would call Orthodox Islam. Each one of these men transformed pain into purpose and purpose into peace. Together they moved from black nationalism to a living solidarity with nearly 2 billion Muslims worldwide, affirming that the call of Islam is not separation, but to shared human dignity. And I have to give credit to AI for my slides. I feed AI my speeches and say, make me a slide presentation. And don't they do a great job? I'll tell you, man, I couldn't do this. I mean, I could, but it would take 3 times as long. And here is where my second vocation as a therapist meets my first as a person of faith. When belonging is denied in a human being, it creates trauma, dysregulation. You ever gone to a church and nobody spoke to you and nobody greeted you and you just didn't feel welcomed? When people are told they don't belong because of color, faith, or name, it tears at the nervous system. And we usually go fight, flight, or feign death. You see, faith answers. Faith says you belong. You are not outside the circle of mercy. You are not forgotten. I radically welcome you. I don't make judgments against you. I don't criticize you, castigate you, or indict you, but I invite you. That's the same answer America's earliest Muslims whispered to themselves on ships and fields. As a white American Muslim, I have often experienced this loneliness. I pray that I never cause anyone to experience that feeling. It is the same answer we need in every generation. Surprise, I did not grow up Muslim. In fact, I was studying to be a Christian minister. I had a full scholarship to Duke University when I was 17 years of age. And because I did not believe that Jesus is God, I ran away to South Africa and did anti-apartheid work and became a humanist. Surprise! Yeah. And then I found my way somewhere else. I came to Islam through searching, through wanting to understand love, justice, and compassion in its widest sense, from perspectives I had never heard about or seen. And Islam taught me that diversity is blessing, mercy is universal, and justice is human. It taught me that revelation is not meant to divide, but to remind us of the light we already share. These are three great gifts Islam has to offer, or has offered to humanity since they arrived. Not as possessions, but as reminders. Tawheed we refer to as the oneness of the Creator. We refer to it as the oneness even in terms of humanity. All life flows from a single source. Adam and Eve. In terms of mercy or rahmah, compassion as the organizing principle of the universe. And so many mentioned as they were dropping stones of hope, their troubled hearts because of what's going on in the universe today. An adl, justice, the balance that keeps mercy real. Together they form the spiritual architecture of Islam, and I believe the spiritual aspiration of humanity itself. We are reminded in the Holy Quran in chapter 49, verse 13, O humankind, we created you from a male and female, and made you peoples and tribes so that you may know one another, identify with each other. Not so that you may conquer one another. Not so that you might convert everybody, but so that you may know one another. This is what I call sacred sociology. Divine diversity. Radical welcome. A celebration of every single human as something of the divine. The roots of this tree reach deep into history, but its branches are still growing right here in this room today. Every act of understanding we extend to one another becomes a new leaf in that tree of light. You are the light. You are a light. The compassion, the justice, Thank you for allowing me to be in your pulpit. Thank you for allowing me to be a member of this community. God bless you all.